Over the past few years, Monolith has been making waves in the home theater space, offering affordable amplifiers, speakers, as well as subwoofers. And with a growing market of consumers interested in 16-channel processors, Monolith has now come out with an affordable 16-channel processor, the HTP-1. Now in a previous video, I went over the specs as well as an initial setup of the HTP-1, and I also did a second video on how to set up Dirac Live with bass control that I will not be covering in this video. Now in this video, I'll be sharing with you my experience of the HTP-1 over the past month in my own home theater, and I'll be sharing with you what I feel it does well and a few things that could use improvement. But before we jump into the final review, here's a word from our show sponsor, the Hi-Fi Summit.
In June 2020, the first ever Hi-Fi Summit began. On October 22nd, the Hi-Fi Summit continues. We received feedback from attendees with overwhelmingly positive responses. Companies were happy with the outcome as well. In the first Hi-Fi Summit, we built long-term relationships between audio enthusiasts alike, as well as companies and their representatives. This time we promise an even more engaging experience, more fun, more learning, more everything. Of course, we'll have TechnoDad hosting the nightly after parties. Get your early bird tickets before October as our journey to the top continues.
The front of the HTP-1 has a sleek design with a brushed aluminum faceplate with a matte black trim. Its minimalistic front face has a modern appeal with a large touchscreen LCD display that is easy to see from your listening position. The display shows the volume level, selected input, upmix selection, and various other system statuses. The front display is a touchscreen, but unfortunately, at the time of this video, the only use for the touchscreen is to set up Wi-Fi and to mute the volume. I like the large LCD display, but I found the touchscreen to be unnecessary since there's limited use for it, and I would have to touch the screen multiple times to get it to respond. Unlike typical AVR and processors, instead of an on-screen display, the HTP-1 utilizes a web user interface, or also referred to as a web UI. On the front display of the HTP-1, you'll find an IP address. Simply plug in that IP address into a web browser on a computer, a tablet, or a mobile device to log into the HTP-1. Once you log in, you're presented with a very clean layout with the essential functions such as volume, video inputs, various upmix options and modes, and also a display of the programming format and listening format. Now this was my first experience with a web UI for a processor, and I can certainly see the benefits as it can be enhanced and updated via future firmware updates. I really like the clean layout of the homepage, which gives you quick access to the essentials. Now if you click on the cogwheel, you'll be presented with various options within the setup menu. Each section is labeled via the tabs at the top, which makes it easy to navigate. I found the web UI to be very responsive when switching between the tabs with almost no lag. The speaker tab allows you to select which speakers are in your setup. As you can see here, my setup consists of a 7.2.4 speaker configuration. The calibration tab allows you to easily switch between Dirac filters and even make level adjustments in real time after you've run Dirac. Now I covered how to set up Dirac Live with bass control in a previous video, which I will link in the card above. Having 6 Dirac filters is great because you can try different settings within Dirac Live and save them as a Dirac filter, and simply by clicking on one of those 6 available filters will switch that Dirac save preset. Now this is really helpful if you want to see how different Dirac settings sound in your setup, or maybe you have certain settings that you want to use for, say, music, and maybe another setting that you want to use for movies. You can even save one with a house curve and maybe one without a house curve, and easily switch between the two to see what you prefer. To me, this is a huge feature for the HTP-1. The signal generator tab is a bit odd to me. This page allows you to generate test tones to level match your speakers, but then you have to switch back to the calibration tab to make adjustments to that speaker. It would be more intuitive to have this on the same page as the calibration tab, or maybe duplicate the user trim from the calibration tab onto the signal generator page so that you can cycle through each speaker and make any trim adjustments on the same page. There's also an EQ tab that gives you a 16-band parametric EQ that you can use. I, however, did not make any adjustments to this tab. The Input tab makes it easy to rename your inputs like I have here, and to toggle on and off which inputs you want to display on your home screen. Now, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find an option for Bluetooth. To me, this was a bit confusing as initially my phone did not see the HTP-1 Bluetooth connection. I had to change this setting to 0 and hit Enable Discovery for it to show up on my phone. From there, you will enable Bluetooth on your computer, mobile, or tablet as you do with all other Bluetooth devices. And when you connect it, it will pop up an option to pair the device with the HTP-1. The Sound Enhancement tab allows you to select which upmix you want as your default and which of these upmixes you want displayed on the home page. The Connectivity tab is where you enable CEC as well as set up your Wi-Fi connection. On the last tab, you have some final settings and adjustments. I would recommend enabling Fast Start, as this will greatly reduce startup from about 1 minute down to a few seconds. Once you boot up for the first time, you'll see a notification on the HTP-1 that has enabled Fast Startup. Now, if you turn this off, you will not be able to turn on the unit through the web UI. I also set a startup volume of -20 dB, and here you can adjust the brightness of the LCD display as well as toggle between 6 volume styles on your home page. Now, since you can't see what they look like until you exit the setup menu, here's a brief look at each one of them. Now, because the HTP-1 utilizes a web UI, you can make any of these changes on the fly even while you're watching a movie. Now, the flip side of that is there is no on-screen display. So if you're like in my setup, you have your HTP-1 inside a cabinet or maybe even in another room, you're not going to be able to see what volume level is set. For me personally, I still would like to see the HTP-1 at least have the on-screen display of the volume. Now, the only issue I had with the web UI was when viewing on my mobile device. On a mobile device, you just have a really narrow width, and the HTP-1 web UI just isn't optimized for mobile viewing. I found that oftentimes I would have to scroll up and down as well as left to right to be able to see all of the options. One example is on the calibration page. If you want to adjust the trim levels after running Dirac, you have to scroll to the right, but then you can't see which speaker you're adjusting. It would be great if in a future update, Monoprice would make this responsive so that you only have to scroll up and down to access all of the options. Now, I really believe that Monolith is off to a great start with their web UI, especially for their first processor, so I'm really excited to see what they come up with and the improvements in future versions. Now, I've had the HTP-1 set up in my home theater for the past month, connected to my Monolith 11X amplifier and powering a 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos system with dual subwoofers. Now, overall, I've been very pleased with its performance. Now, the HTP-1 has probably the best room correction software that I have had a chance to review. Dirac Live provides a very robust platform for room correction, and it also allows you to do things like add a house curve, EQ, and you can even use curtains to limit the frequencies that Dirac corrects. Now, Dirac Live also has a bass control add-on for the HTP-1 for $349 for a single sub or $499 for multiple subwoofers. Now, I found in my setup, Bass Control did an excellent job at providing a flat frequency response for my subs, and Bass Control actually has more control and features than my Mini DSP 2x4 HD. I found with Bass Control, it actually replaced the Mini DSP 2x4 HD that I have in my system. The HTP-1 does a phenomenal job with channel separation as well as object placement. Dialogue was clear and the overall sound was very impactful. Now, video switching between the inputs isn't necessarily the fastest. It takes about 10 to 12 seconds to switch between each input. In my setup, I have a PS4, a Pioneer UDP LX500 4K player, and a Fire Stick TV 4K. Each one took about the same amount of time to switch between. Now, as far as any bugs or glitches, I only found 2 really small ones during the past month that I've reviewed the unit. The first one was in regards to the calibration tab. For whatever reason, I initially set it up, added all the parameters there, and I think I ended up turning the unit off and turning it back on kind of quickly. And when I did, I went back to the calibration page and all of that content was gone. So I just had to re-add that. The second small glitch I ran into was in regards to the LCD display. Only one time it did not show like the volume and then all of the other parameters on there. It had some really small text which was showing some of those details, but it just didn't look normal. So I just powered it all the way down, powered it back up, and it went back to normal. Now, other than those two small glitches, the HTP-1 has been extremely stable. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this review is price. Some of you guys in my previous video gave me some flack because I mentioned that the HTP-1 is affordable. Now here's the deal. If you're looking at a 16-channel processor, you pretty much moved beyond budget system. So if you're thinking you're going to get a 16-channel processor, a dedicated processor for like 1,500 bucks, that's just not happening. My comment was in regards and in comparison to the other 16-channel processors that are on the market. Now, if we take a look at this list of processors, you can see the Emotiva XMC-2 is the least expensive option at $3,000. Tied with the Monolith HTP-1 is the Emotiva RMC-1L that they just announced. The RMC-1 that I previously reviewed is currently at $5,000, the Acurus Muse at $5,500, the JBL Synthesis SDP55 at $6,000, and then you jump way on up in the Trenov and Bryston at $16,000 and $17,000. So if you look at that list, you can definitely see that the HTP-1 is in a very competitive market, and it's really at the low end of that spectrum. Now overall, I've had an amazing experience with the HTP-1. I think it provides a great value. It sounds phenomenal. It has a great web UI and built-in Dirac Live, which is an incredible room correction software. Now make sure you're subscribed to the channel because I've also got the Marantz SR8015 flagship AVR in for review, and so you don't want to miss that. And if you're interested in the HTP-1, check out the link in the description below. I've also got 2 videos on the HTP-1 that you can check out right here. And as always, you guys be blessed, and we'll catch you in the next video.